So one other thing, so everything we've been doing so far has been in like Android Studio, but like sometimes you don't want to like open this huge big program that takes so long to load. Maybe you have a computer at home that doesn't support the amount of memory it needs. So there's other IDEs you can use. Android Studio is nice because you can build a mobile app from scratch and package it, and it produces all the files for you. But if you just want to like play around with some Kotlin code, I showed you that online editor you can use. Right? If you go to Kotlin's official website here, and then kotlinlang.org, and click on Try Online, there's that editor, right, where you can type code and it'll execute it for you. But you can also like download some lightweight IDE, like this one's called Atom, ATOM, and I'll put a link to that in the lecture notes. And Atom is like a general editor, and then you can install these packages for it. So like there's a package for Kotlin, so that when I type Kotlin code, it knows how to highlight it. Like if I just name my file something.kt, it knows, oh, this is a Kotlin file, and it knows how to highlight, like fun will be red because it's a function, it knows what that means. And then there's something called linting, which is if I type code and there's a problem, like I made a mistake in my code. So one thing is to show, like, to color code the code so it knows like fun should be red because it's a function. But if I made a syntax error, or if I wrote something that's a logical error in my code that's like that Android Studio would tell you this is an error and this is the reason for the error. So that's called linting. So there's another package you can install for linting. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But so because I install those packages, if I like make a mistake here, then it'll like show me what the mistake is, and I'll get a little like this little yellow thing will pop up, and it'll show me the warning that you made this mistake. Let me see if I can force something here like linting is L-I-N-T.
Oh no, line.
What's your question?
The first one, Kotlin line.
Oh, the website? Yeah, it's all over the, like every single lecture notes is there, but it's try.kotlinlang.org. But this is like in every lecture notes I have a link to that stuff. It's the language reference website. Like there's no required textbook for this course, but that's the required textbook. The Kotlin site and the Google Android site are the required reading sites. So anyway, you can go to, if you just Google Atom editor, and again, it's atom.io. So you can download, this shows, because I'm on a Mac, shows for Mac, but it's supported on Windows and a bunch of other platforms. So you just download it, you can install it if you want. And then you need to install the project, or the packages for Kotlin. The cool thing about Atom is it also supports Bootstrap. You can install a package for Bootstrap, and then you can do all your Bootstrap editing. So if you don't want to pay for like Dreamweaver or something, or deal with Dreamweaver or some other IDE, and you don't want to do everything in Notepad++, this is much, much better than Notepad++. I'm going to actually ask them to install this on the machines for next semester instead of Notepad++, so that the students have easier time, because it'll color code and everything for you. Okay, so here's Atom, and just to show you real quick, like if I want to install a package for Bootstrap or for Kotlin, this is how I do it. I just go to Packages, and then where are we? Settings view. And I'm recording this too, so maybe I'll post the recording later so you guys can just go over that. But settings view, and then you can do install packages and themes. So themes are just like how it looks, the color of the background and stuff. Like I'm using a custom theme right now. And then you can install packages, or you can install themes. So you can switch between packages and themes. So you want to go to the packages and just search on Kotlin, Kotlin, and it finds there's language-Kotlin. So then I've already installed it, but if you hadn't, it would say install. Mine says uninstall because I've already got it, or I could disable it. And then this is the linter I was talking about. So there's Kotlin lang, or language-Kotlin, and linter-Kotlin. So if you install these two, you're good to go as far as like being able to like go in here and start typing Kotlin code. Okay. And then same thing for Bootstrap. If you wanted to do Bootstrap, you can just type in here Bootstrap, search, and it'll show you like, oh, there's Atom-Bootstrap. Same thing from Markdown. So in Markdown, it's like a shortcut way to write HTML. Like the text editor I use a lot supports Markdown. You can like write stuff. Like for example, if I want to make something H1, HTML can be cumbersome. You have to write an opening tag and then a closing tag, and you have to have all the proper syntax. In Markdown, I could just type like # space, and whatever I type is already H1. And instead of typing a bracket H1 close bracket and then type your text and then a closing tag, it's just a lot quicker to do this. So I could like put 2 pounds and it's H2, okay, and I can put 3 pounds and it's H3. And if I want to make some code, like make something look like code, I can just put a backtick, type in my code, function to do it does something, blah blah blah, and then close tick. So that makes it look like code. And then if I want to make like multi-line code, I can do like this. I can have 3 backticks. I can actually write the name of the code. This editor doesn't support Kotlin, so that's why it's not color coding it. But if I typed in like Swift or HTML, it would like color code according to whatever language it was. So there's like all these cool shortcuts. This editor is called Bear. It's free if you want to get it if you have a Mac. It doesn't, it's on Mac and iOS only. But anyway, this is just an example of an editor that supports Markdown. So same thing, Atom supports Markdown. Now why I brought this up is because Kotlin and Swift both support Markdown in their comments. So let me just show you real quick. I'll open this while I'm talking. But like you can type your code in a way, you can add comments that are self-documenting, but instead of just having like / and a comment, you can make comments that documentation can actually be generated from your code. So there's a whole thing on how to do that for Kotlin on the Kotlin site. I have an example here, I'll show you real quick. But where is it? Oh, here it is. So documenting Kotlin. So there's something called kdoc syntax. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically like, here's a standard comment. You have the /*, and then end it with the //, right? By the way, comments are on the exam, just like on the quiz. So make sure you know how to do comments in XML and comments in Kotlin, right? But then like you can have like this @param. Now this is not Markdown, but if you put @param, like here's the function. So any parameters you put @param, and then when you generate the documentation, there's something for Java called JavaDoc. So Kotlin has something called kdoc, I believe. Yeah, kdoc. So it's very similar to JavaDoc, where you just run this program and it'll create this documentation. So if you've ever gone to like a website, like Kotlin's website or Java's website, and they have like the language reference, and it has like these are the classes for this class, these are the properties, and these are the functions. It's generated by this kind of thing in the actual code. So let me show you like an example in Swift. So here's a function arrow, right? But string is just like in Kotlin, string is a built-in type, and so is like this thing called SCN node. If I command click on this and jump into the definition, it'll jump into the source code for that thing, which is written by Apple in this case, right? So you'll see above that there's this documentation, a comment, right? /*, same thing as in Kotlin, and then @class, so that's the class name, and then @abstract and discussion. Like there's these keywords that they use this @ symbol in front of, and then when they generate the documentation, it looks like this. So you just go to their website. I just Google SCN node and it'll find it in the Apple Docs. Okay. So when you generate the documentation, it looks like this. Like it makes a web page, and it's got here's the class name. This is coming from here, like directly. It's being translated into this web page. So it looks really nice. So if you're on a project and they're like, you need to provide documentation, blah, 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 right? And there's all like, you're like, of course I always do documentation. My code's self-documenting, literally self-documenting, right? You put this kind of stuff in your code. It doesn't take more than a few minutes, and you can generate this documentation and like kind of say, oh wow, this guy like spent all this time and so professional, but it's just you generate it from your code. So like all this thing, like all this paragraphs and stuff, it's because they put this discussion and abstract in there. Okay, and then like as far as I wanted to show you like Markdown. So in my code, and this is useful not just for documentation, but inside of your class. Like if I'm here and I want to know like what does this class do, and I didn't write this, right? So I can hold down the Option key in Mac and click on it, and it brings up this window, and it shows me like all this information about the class. What are the properties? What are the parameters you need to send into it? What's it inherited from? Where is it supported? So all this information comes up. So for your classes that you write, you can do the same thing using Markdown. So I'll just show you a quick example of that, if I can find it. Actually, I can just search for backtick, maybe. Oh, here we go. Okay, so here's a class I wrote, or function I wrote. Okay, update target. So I'm sending a bunch of, or I'm using a bunch of these variables in here, and these variables are actually in my visual editor. Okay, so let me just jump real quick to a visual view. And this is similar to what you see in Android Studio, but it's on iOS. And I'm just using it for a quick example. Here we go, storyboards. Actually, I wanted this one. Okay, so like here's like one of my views, and like here's some objects in my view, right? And if I click on it, I want to be able to see like this is a property I want to talk to from my code, right? It's a lot easier to do it this way than it is in Android Studio. But for the exam in Android Studio, you need to know how do I connect my code to something in my visual layout, like a button. How do I put a listener on that button so that when you click on it, something happens? Okay, which we went over last week, but I'll go over it again. So I can just like click on this, and I can see these things called outlets. So I know like this thing that I clicked on is defined in the code, and I could like literally drag from here into my code, and it's like I can press Control and drag and create a new outlet. That's how easy it is. So I can drag from the visual editor into the code and say create a property, so I can talk to this property from my code and do stuff with that thing in my visual layout. I'm just going to hit escape so I don't actually change this. And same thing with functions. So like if I wanted to like say when I click on this button do something, let me just make sure I'm on the button. Yeah, I'm on the button. So I could like drag this into my code here, and I want to make a new action, which is a function. Okay, I'm going to call it test function, and I hit connect, and it literally writes the function for me, you know, an empty function, and I can just start typing my code. So when I click the button, do what? And I can start typing my code there. It's really, really straightforward. Just going to undo all that, and go back here. Okay, so I spoke about Markdown, and I spoke about how to install Atom and setting it up. If you have issues with that, and like email me, and I'll try to do a little quick walkthrough video if this isn't enough. Okay, so we're gonna make this game called FizzBuzz. Okay, and what FizzBuzz is you're driving in a car somewhere, okay, and you have a long car drive, and you guys are bored. So there's this game called FizzBuzz where you guys count from like 1 to 100, and you if the number is divisible by 15, then you're going to say FizzBuzz instead of the number. And if the number is divisible by 3, then you want to say Fizz. This is a mistake. And if it's divisible by 5, then you return Buzz. My comments are all messed up. I think I copy-pasted that. Okay, so let me zoom in so you can see what this looks like. Okay. And again, like this is just an example of the documentation at the top, where it says param. Okay. So function FizzBuzz takes an integer I. Okay. And then there's when, which is control. Like so when, and then I have what to return. Okay. So this percent sign means modulus. So modulus is what does anyone know what modulus is from other programming class? What is it?
Multiplication?
No, multiplication is multiplication. It's a kind of division. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of modulus operator as like a math function, if you will.
Yeah. So you want to know if there's a remainder.
Oh, that's correct. That's right.
So modulus does a division and then gives you back the remainder.
Right.
So
So
it's
17 divided by 5 would be 3, but it wouldn't. Or no, I'm sorry. We give you 2. It wouldn't do anything with 3 that you divided by 5.
Right. So modulus returns you what is the remainder. Okay. So this is like, I don't want to say universal, but it's common in many, many languages. Okay. So and it's written the same way in many languages. It's the same thing in Swift. Okay. Probably in Java. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been like 20 years since I did it in Java. But anyway, so if my number here is like 30, 30 modulus 15 is what? What was 30 divided by 15? So is there any remainder? No. So is the modulus going to return me a 0? See the condition? Equals is it equal to? So if it's divisible by 15 so that there's no remainder, right, then return this word FizzBuzz. Okay? And same thing for 3 and 5, but return fizz and buzz instead. Okay? So what that's going to do is if this function is given a number, it's going to do a division. So if I give it 31, the remainder is going to be 2 remainder 1, right? So it's not going to be any of these conditions. So the else here just returns back the number. Okay? So then I have my main, okay? And you guys need to know how to write this, right? Especially the main. Like you should, and it's helpful for you too. Like if you go into the online code editor and want to type your code and run it, which I recommend you do in the exam because it's allowed and it'll help you, right? But in the main, then I just say I have a for loop, okay? And then I say for I in 1 to 100. So that's one difference between like Swift and Kotlin. Kotlin will be dot dot is the range function, and in Swift it's like dot dot dot. Okay, but you get the idea. Like in English, when you say dot dot dot, you know, it's like it means wait for a period. So in programming, it means like for a range from 1 to 100 or from whatever to whatever is on the other sides of this operator. Ranges, you need to make sure you are familiar with that for the exam. And there's a link, or there will be a link. There's a link in the review notes, and I'll post that again on the lecture notes for the different types of range functions. So there's 2 I'm going to go over in class today. Okay, with the dot dot, and then there's a step function, which we'll talk about in a second. So you can follow the logic. Can you guys see this one? Okay.
Yeah.
So for I in 1 to 100. So for where I is 1 and then 2 and then 3 all the way until I is 100, it says print, right? And then print what? It calls the function in the print statement. Okay. So you can use, or functions can be used as a variable name, right? So variables, functions, interchangeable. And then print FizzBuzz sub I, or FizzBuzz with the value of I. So it calls this function FizzBuzz. So the first time it'll call it FizzBuzz with 1, and then it'll go here. Is 1 modulus 15 0? No. Okay. How about 3? 0. And how about 5? No. So 4. It's going to return 1, right? So it's going to print what in the first time? It's going to print 1, and then so on for 2 and 3. So we can see what the output looks like just by copy pasting this into. Let me zoom back out so I can see my screen.
So when it's in the function, it's saying like the function FizzBuzz equals a 1 statement. Is that just because it's faster than having 1 statement inside a block?
Yeah, I mean, just it's more concise, but it's the same thing. So let me go back to the code. You mean wait? You mean over here
Up
or
on top where it says function FizzBuzz equals 1.
yeah? So this is a this is yeah. All this statement is executed as this function.
That's still just a regular 1 statement.
Yeah.
In terms of okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm just going to go to the Kotlin Lang thing, and if you log in to this, then you can actually save your code too. So I've done that. I've logged in with my GitHub account, and then I can see my programs, and then I've saved this copy here, FizzBuzz. Okay. So this is just exact same thing I was showing in Atom, but inside of the web editor. And I hit run, and it's not doing anything. Why not? I don't see any errors. Let me get rid of this. Let me try reloading the page. Okay, run. Okay, there we go. So I can see the output of my code here. So I have 1, 2, and then for 3, I mod just 3 is 0, so it's going to return fizz. So you see fizz. And then 4, and then 5, I mod just 5 is 0, so it's going to return buzz, and so on, all the way to 100, 98, fizz, buzz. Okay. Okay. So let's make it a little bit more interesting now. Okay. So you got bored of doing this game because you guys are math wizards. You can do all this in your head, right? So you're like, okay, let's go backwards. Let's count backwards, and let's only print even numbers. Okay. So I've got the code already done for you here, but any yeah, so you got tired of the rules. This is the comment. After an hour, so you want to complicate. So you want to start counting backward from 100. So from 100 to 1, only include the even numbers. Okay. So you're going to start with 100. So it's the same thing, same function, no difference. But instead of saying 1.100, I just change it to 100 down to 1. That's the first part. So instead of dot dot, I'm using down to. And how do I know what down to is or where that came from? Again, if you look at the documentation for ranges, which is okay. If you go to Kotlin reference and then basics and then reference, nope, where is it? Okay, I lost where it is. Ranges, ranges, ranges. Here we go, ranges. Okay, so here's the documentation ranges. So you have the dot dot, right? Then you have other ones, reversed, step, and there is somewhere here down to. There we go, down to. So here's, they show down to. So 1 and 4 down to 1. Okay, so this prints 4, 3, 2, 1. I have too many windows open. Okay, so 1 and 100 down to 1. So it'll go from 100 and then 99, 98, and if I had just 100 down to 1, it'll go 98, 97, 96, all the way down to 1. But then I have a step modifier here, and I said step 2. So it's going to go every other number. It's going to go 100, 98, 96 because of the step 2. Again, all this is in the documentation. Just review that page so you understand what are different options for ranges and
Where
and
is
steps.
that page? Is it in our notes?
It's going to be. It's in this note. It's right here. So I'm going to
Okay.
post this on the lecture notes.
Perfect.
But yeah, and if you need to like browse to it, it's here. It's under reference ranges.html. So that's what I thought it was. Reference. Getting started. Let's see. Docs reference ranges. Reference. Okay, and I'll put a link there so you can find it. So anyway, I ran this already, so you can see it does buzz, then 98, fizz, 94, 92, so there's only even numbers printed here. So again, the whole point of this is to illustrate that, again, while loops, for loops, and the ranges, and just be familiar with these 2 examples. I will post the code, all of that online so you guys can look at it and review it for the exam. And that FizzBuzz game, by the way, it's from that book Kotlin in Action. Again, you don't need to get the book. That's all that you need to know. The other thing you should know about loops is like, alright, I said some loops they execute before the conditional and some execute after the conditional. So just be aware of the difference, which ones do which. Okay, so like understand for a when or for a for loop, like is it evaluating the condition and then executing, or executing one time and then evaluating the condition? Okay, that's on the exam. Okay, so when we did an Android app, let me get rid of Xcode and put an Android Studio. So some things that are common to like every single Android app that we made and that you will ever make. You have some main activity, right? There's a class associated with that, and there's a layout associated with that. So make sure you know how to write the main activity class, especially the signature of the class. So I'll just go over that. Let's make a new Android Studio project. And we'll call this week 13 example. And I need to put it somewhere else. And always make sure you check include Kotlin support. And for phone, and I'm going to just do an empty activity. Next. And the defaults. So here I'm calling the activity name MainActivity and the layout name activity main. Again, you could change that and you'll see it's different in the manifest file. I'm not changing it just not to confuse anyone, okay? But you should go ahead and change it if you want so you understand where it works. And I'm not going to do backwards compatibility. I'm going to hit finish.
You just call it whatever you're doing.
So it's made me this new project. And I have my app folder, Java, main activity. So class main activity is of type activity. And I have my layout file, activity underscore main. And again, these are defined and they are located in the manifest. So if I go to my manifest, I have my single activity tag, and I know I see this launcher word, so I'm like, oh, okay, that means that this is the main one that's going to launch, this main. So main activity right here. Main activity, and if I command click or control click on Windows, it'll take me actually into that class file. Okay, so I know this is the one. So this is the signature for this class right here. Class MainActivity colon which type of activity, and then open bracket. So make sure you can write that or recognize that for the exam. Okay, hint. And then because I've done a very simple example, an empty activity, there's no custom code in here yet. So you see the bare minimum stuff. So on create, you always need on create, which means when this creates your application, what's it going to do? You always call super first, super.onCreate, and then we have this R, which is a special class, and you need to know about this for the exam. Okay, so R is a, and I've talked about this a lot, but I haven't explained like really what it is. So basically, it's a class that's generated by Android for you. You don't actually never need to look into the source code for that class because it's just automatically generated. But what it does is it has a reference, like it's got a list of references for all of your layouts, like all the different things in your layout, as opposed to like what's in your code. So if you need to do like something to a button or to a view in your layout, it's going to look it up using this R class. Okay, so that's why you use R.layout and then .activity main. So this links that the content view is going to be this activity main XML file. Okay, so if I was going to refer to something in my layout, I'm going to use this R to refer to it. Does that make sense? And then again, if you control click on Windows or command click on Mac into that, it'll drop you into which XML file it's talking about there, which is the main activity underscore main in this case. Okay, any questions about that? So again, just understand the manifest, understand the signature for the main activity. Remember that onCreate is the required. There's a bunch of, remember we went over the life cycle? Go over the life cycle. Go over those lecture notes for the life cycle. The exam as it is, I have to do some modifications because it's all like Java based, but it doesn't really ask anything about life cycle, but I could add that, so just make sure you're familiar with that. Okay, then the next thing was, how do we bind a button that we declare in our layout to our code? Like, how do we do something in that code? And the way I showed you last time that works well is setting a listener, right? So let me just open that example back up. Let's see, week 12, and I think this one had an example of it. Okay. So for this one, in the layout, oh, and what is the main layout file? So again, let's go to the manifest, and actually let's go to the Kotlin file, which was this one, and we want to know for onCreate, we look for this set content view R, right? And then dot layout, and then this is going to be the main layout file that's loaded initially, right? So I'm going to go to that file, and I want to know for, let's look at the design view, like here's a button, right? So is this button somehow hooked into my code, right? Does it do something, right? I mean, this is the main button in the app, so hopefully it does something, right? And if I look at the OnClick, the code view, it's easier. So this button lets me modify. It's called Enter Text button. Okay, so I'm going to look for that in my code view. Enter Text button. So I have a text view button, Enter Text button. Okay, so here there's nothing telling me like, hey, when I click on this button, do something, right? And that's not in the XML. That's got to be in my code somehow. So I know this is called Enter Text button. Let's look in the code and see, like, is there something that says do something with Enter Text button, right? So let's look at take picture activity and Enter Text button. There it is. Set onClick listener this, and this refers to like this class. Okay, so if I command click on this, will it take me to the button? Yeah, it jumps right into the button. So I know that's right. And how does it know to do this? Like, how do I make this work? There's something in this class that makes this actually work. Like, I can type enter text button and it knows to find that. There's a shortcut. Do you guys remember that from last week? Kind of a shortcut. There's an import statement I have to have here, right? So it's this one. Kotlin X, Android, synthetic, main activity, take picture, dot star. So I have a note, I think in my review notes about this. Yeah, so the old way to do this in Android before Kotlin, they had this thing called find view by ID, and it caused tons and tons of bugs. It's like really problematic. So don't ever, if you see that and like you're looking at a sample project or there's at a tutorial and it's saying uses find view by ID, just don't do that, okay? So Kotlin has brought like all these shortcuts and all these like easier ways of doing things. So like the networking thing I'm going to show you today, it's a few lines of code. To do that in Java, like there's all this overhead that you have to do that we're just going to completely skip and not even talk about, okay? So it's much simpler in Kotlin. So again, just a heads up, if you're looking at tutorials for how to do stuff, and if it's a Java tutorial you're trying to translate to Kotlin, just be aware of that things are much simpler. Or like, I'm updating a Ray Wenderlich tutorial for networking also right now. So the author of that wrote the Kotlin version of that tutorial for like Google or something. And she has all this like code in there that she doesn't actually need to do. Like there's like one line of code that you could do to skip all of that. I'll show that to you. But it's because she's a Java developer and she's an experienced Android developer, so she's used to doing things a certain way. And it's like hard when you like get this new language to like all of a sudden like do things easier. But if you're learning for the first time, just do it the easy way, right? Okay. So if you have this import statement, Kotlin X, Android, synthetic, main activity, just, you know, actually, so what is this? Kotlin X, that's gonna, Android, that's synthetic, okay, up to here, this is gonna tell you, or tell the program that, okay, it's gonna let you connect your code to your visual layouts. Then this part, .MainActivity, .main.activity underscore take picture. This is, notice anything here? Is my screen too small? See, activity underscore take picture .xml. Okay, so that's linking it to that XML file.
So does .synthetic mean anything in particular that we need to worry about?
You need to use it. What does it
We need
actually?
to use it, but I mean, does it mean anything obvious or just
I'd have to look up like what it actually means, but it's
kind of
yeah, something in Kotlin X. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's a package name. And Android's a package name. So these are all package names. So like this is the path to this package, right?
Right.
But then after here, like even main, I think is I'm not sure if main is linked to something in the actual project or if it's a package name. But then for sure, like activity take picture is the name of the XML file, okay? And then .star means everything underneath that. So like traditionally in Java, when you do an import, like if you use something that's defined in another class somewhere, you have to put an import statement, okay? And then if you want to, like, when you do an import, it's for a package name. There's a whole path all the way down to the class name. But if there's a whole bunch of classes in that package and you don't want to like write a different import for every single class, you can just write the import for the package name .star, and it'll import all the classes in that package up to that whatever was before the star. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, if I wanted to end everything under app, Android.app, I would put Android.app.star. Now, why you don't put .star here in this activity is because that adds a lot of overhead to add everything under Android.app that you're not using. Why import all of that? So here specifically, you want to be able to use activities, so it's got Android.app.activity. Okay. But in this case, for the XML file, I want to be able to link to all the different UI elements in that XML file, in that layout file. So that's why you just want everything dot star. If you didn't put dot star, then you have to list like every single like button or whatever. Like dot enter text button. Okay, actually let me change this to this. Okay, and see what happens. So now you see this turn red. It knows what enter text button is still, but now it doesn't know what picture image view is. So I could write this whole statement again, dot picture image view, or I could just put dot star and import everything. So I mean, maybe you don't want to import everything and you want like 2 or 1 control only, then you could do that. But I mean, generally it's best practice for a layout. If you're going to be writing code to manipulate the layout, import all the parts of the layout. Okay? So again, what it takes to connect my button in my layout XML file to my code in my Kotlin file. So I have this import statement, and then I set a listener on the button to do something. So set OnClick listeners do something when it's clicked on. Okay? And then if I use an OnClick listener, then there's a built-in function called OnClick. Because it's built in, I need to override it, right? If it was my own function, which in Swift and iOS development, like we generally don't do this. We don't have an OnClick listener. You write a custom function and you do whatever. So yeah, but because it's an OnClick, so OnClick is a built-in function, and notice like for this button and for this thing, they're all going to call the same function. So because they're all calling the same function, you need to handle, depending on what was clicked, what do I do, right? So what you do is then you have specific functions for each thing, but you tell in the OnClick, oh, for this thing, call that function. For this thing, if it's clicked on, call that function. So it's like an extra step. In iOS, we don't go through that rigmarole, but that's just how it is. So again, here's this R class, right, that I was talking about. So again, R is this class that has a reference of like all the IDs for all the different things in your layout versus like, you know, what they're named. So because I use R, I can use r.id and dot the name of the thing. So if I click on picture image view, you'll see the name is ID at plus ID picture image view. So there's a whole explanation of this, how this works with the at sign and all that, and I have a link to it in the, I think in the lecture notes for this week. So just make sure so you understand. I don't want to spend all the class time talking about it, but it's either in here or I will put it in here or it's in the review notes. But there's a whole explanation in the documentation of how this works. So if you read through that, it'll like help you remember this stuff, okay? But just to keep it short, where am I? That's the other thing I hate about Android Studio is like, again, not to rag on it too much because it's great compared to what else options there were, but like in iOS, I can like control click or command click on something, jumps to it. I can hit the back key and go back to where I was. You can't really do that, or if you can, I don't know how to do it. So again, set OnClick listener, and then I go to my OnClick function, and then so r.id dot, and then the name of the thing, then return the function that I'm going to call. Okay, so this says basically return this value, which is a function name. Okay, so if this is the thing that's clicked on, return this function. If this is the thing that's clicked on, return this thing. So for save image, it calls this function, asks for permission, and then it does its code. Okay, so you guys see how it's wired up, right? Using OnClick listener. There's another way to wire it up, like directly from the layout. I talked about it like weeks and weeks ago. I'm not gonna. It's not an exam. I'm not gonna ask you about an exam, and it's not a best practice. This is a better way to do it because this is more concise. It's cleaner. You can see it in the code, and it keeps your functionality, your code outside of the XML. Okay, like outside your layout. Keeps good separation of concerns. It's called. Okay. Any questions?
What's the difference between lowercase v and uppercase v?
We already see that.
I mean, I just like came across it like a couple times. Like, it's a view and uppercase v.
Yeah, so the upper, so let me type it out. So you're saying like view like this, right? Okay, so if you see this, first of all, it's probably like let view like type view. Does it look like something like this?
Yeah, or
Equal.
it's something like that.
So this is a variable name. This is a type. So V with a capital, this is why the camel case thing is important. Like even though it's just a convention, but class names are capitalized. So if you see something start with a capital letter, it should be a class. So if I command click on this, actually it's probably not going to do that here because I'm not in Android Studio. If I go here, V of type view. This is just a variable name. Okay, so this is a function. It takes a parameter V.
Or like something they call it, name it whatever.
Yeah, I could say this, like, or I could say like himbo, mumbo, jumbo stuff. Okay, this is just some variable name.
And what does that view class do?
Okay, so view, let's look at it. What does it do? So it is, so if I'm holding on the command key on Mac, I don't know what you do on Windows. And again, it shows me this Java doc or this KDoc thing, right? So it's a class, and it has these different interface. These are the different interfaces. So the different types of functionality it implements. So it's drawable. It can handle events. It can handle accessibility stuff. So it's just what it is this thing that you can draw on in Android Studio. So it's a view. It's like a master class for like a button might be a type of view. Okay, but it's like a sub class. So a view is like some kind of presentation layer in Android. Okay, they define for you.
So I guess what you're getting in that function is you're getting the UI element that caused the event.
Yeah. So instead of passing, so suppose I didn't do a button, I passed like I didn't do a view. I passed a button to OnClick. First of all, this is not going to work because I'm overriding a function, so I'm trying to change the method signature. So that's not going to work. But see, notice that it says button is an Android widget, but button is a subtype of view. View is like this master class. Okay, Android.view, and it's defined in Android. So like it's not available just like in normal Kotlin. It's part of the Android framework. Okay. So like, and then like so views will like again like when we were talking about like classes in general, like views will have like some things defined for them. Like you can draw some things on them in a certain way. So they have some drawing methods, and you can like set like maybe the background color or something. They have, and that's defined for all views. So like if you make a button that's a subtype of it, it'll have those things available to it. If you make a list view, then it'll have all the things inherited from view also, but it has some additional stuff defined that, oh, list views have to have like this collection property, for example. Or buttons have to have like these state properties, like click or they have these events they throw, like on click and on release or something like that. Okay? Does that answer your question? Yeah. But I mean, basically this syntax is like, this colon means type, right? So the thing before the colon is the variable, and then the thing after the colon is the type that it is. Yeah, so now because I call this V, it's just using this variable name. So I pass some kind of view to this function, and then again, like we saw earlier with the when, yeah, this when expression. When replaces the switch operator of C-like languages. Cool. Okay. So so these are the conditions. So this is the condition, and then these are the possibilities, okay? So again, this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, and then you finish it with an else, which is like a catch-all, okay? So depending on the language, it's either required or it's a best practice, okay? But in other words, in general, if you're using a switch, it should be exhaustive. If it's not exhaustive, it means if you left out a condition, then that's like bad programming. Okay, because you could have accidentally forgotten to put in a condition. So the else will be like, if any of these previous conditions aren't met, then do this thing. Okay, and here like there's nothing to do, so it just prints this like no case was satisfied. So at least when you're running this as and debugging this, and you'll see this print statement in your console, like, oh, I'm clicking on this and nothing's happening, and then you say, oh, I see this print statement, it means I forgot to handle that in my OnClick statement. Any other questions?